if you want the tabs for the lick you just heard, you can find that in the notation package for this lesson, which you will find on my Patreon. You have the link in the description. So today's topic is what I would practice if I had to restart my guitar journey, right? I specifically talk about alternate picking here, because when I started, I did a routine that I showed you a few videos ago. So if you haven't checked that out, you can check a link for that in the description as well. So while that approach worked for me, if I had to do it again, I would probably go this route instead. And basically focusing on two different exercises. So we have this Yngwie type sequence. And we have this classic Paul Gilbert lick as well. So whether you're new to this fast alternate picking stuff, or you've been playing for a while and for whatever reason you didn't get the hang of it, I'm going to share a practice routine that's 20 minutes long that you should do daily. And if you stick to that one and abide by the principles that I'm going to share with you, you will see a big improvement in your picking technique over the next few weeks. The first one here, the Yngwie type sequence, I'm going to show it here. So basically 5, 7, 8, and then we're going to do 8, 5, 7, and then 8, 7, 5. So that's the sequence, a 6-note sequence. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1. Just alternate pick it, starting with a downstroke. And then we have the Paul Gilbert sequence, which if we do it in this position again, it's just going to be 5, 6, 8 on the B string, and then we got 5 on the high E string, and we're going to go. So the whole point here is focusing on the string crossing. Again, alternate picking, starting with a downstroke. So why these two sequences work so well together is because you have the first one focusing on a single string, because a lot of people tend to neglect that and want to move on to harder exercises while they can't get their hands together on one string, which is a big mistake. And then we have the second problem, crossing the string. So by focusing on these two initially, you can make a lot of ground very quickly. And that's the benefit of focusing on just two sequences, because you're not spreading yourself too thin. You're actually really focusing on something that's gonna be very common in other patterns as well. If you learn some Petrucci stuff or whatever modern fast picking stuff in the 3-note per string kind of vein, you're gonna see a lot of these patterns that are very similar to these two patterns. So you could say it's like the DNA of shred guitar if you want. Another huge reason why I would choose these two sequences is because that's what Paul Gilbert did. And he said in several interviews he started with this one, and then when that started to work out for him, he would practice this one. And obviously he's been practicing a lot of different sequences, so I don't want to blow smoke here and make you believe that, oh, just practice these two and you can play everything ever written. No, but mastering these and getting them to a really comfortable and accurate and relaxed level will unlock a lot of other stuff for you as well. And it's going to be way less of a hassle to move on to other sequences. And by focusing on two sequences, you don't really have an excuse not to get your practice in, because it's very easy to wrap your head around. You just need to sit down and do it and make sure that you get your practice in every day, because at the end of the day it's the consistency that's going to build the technique for you. And I'm going to share a 20-minute practice schedule that you can do every day as well. And whether or not you do this as your exclusive technique practice schedule, or if it's just part of your overall technique practice, both approaches are good. But I do think that start with this, and then if you have the time, definitely add some more time to these exercises, or simply add some other sequences as well. Because the more you practice, the better you're gonna get. I mean, Captain Obvious over here, but that's the way it goes, right? But 20 minutes of really focused practice where everything is just perfect as you sit and repeat these in the way that I'm going to show you, that's going to get you a long way, especially if you're new to this stuff. Before we get into the practice schedule, I just want to say that another reason why this works so well is that you're going to get some quick wins, meaning that you're going to see progress quicker when you focus on two fairly fundamental patterns, and you can really hone in on your technique and get everything right, instead of having a bunch of longer exercises where you might have issues just remembering what you're supposed to do. So these really takes it down to a very basic level. And that doesn't mean, basic as necessarily a beginner, but in the sense that you have very few things that you need to focus on. And that makes all the difference when it comes to practicing, especially in this TikTokified world where, people's attention spans are all over the place. So let's dive right into this practice schedule, and then you can get going with your practicing. All right, so what I suggest here is that you use a timer. I tend to use a timer like this, basically like that. And I use a time period of 5 minutes most of the time. And that's because 5 minutes is enough time to get a lot of reps in, especially on a short pattern like this, or two short patterns. And it's not long enough to feel overwhelming. So if you would go 10 minutes or 15 minutes, you might be a bit more inclined to procrastinate because you don't really want to choose one thing or another for that period of time. So 5 minutes, most people can do that without much of a problem. And doing it this way will really train your ability to focus as well. So I think it's beneficial for a lot of people these days, coming back to that TikTokified general population. So what I suggest then is that you do the first exercise. We're going to do that in two different ways. So we have the Yngwie sequence, and I initially showed it like this with 1, 3, 4. But now we want to do it the same way, but 1, 2, 4 instead. So you go. So same sequence and everything. It's just that we use 1, 2, 4 instead of 1, 3, 4. So the first 5-minute period, you simply choose a position on the fretboard and a string. So let's say we do the B string, 9th fret, and I start with 1, 2, 4. I put on my metronome, and before you start this, find a speed where you feel super confident that you can get through 5 minutes without fatiguing, without making any type of mistakes. So this might mean that for a beginner, for example, or someone new to this picking type practice, you might have to sit with a metronome on like 60 BPMs and play one note per click. And that's fine. That doesn't really matter. You have to start where you are. So wherever that is, doesn't matter. Turn on the timer and then you start. So as you play this, just listen and feel what you're playing. And I really mean feel in the sense that you can feel your fingers moving. And if anything feels weird, try to adjust that so you find something that feels really comfortable. So you don't want to tense up unnecessarily. You just want enough tension to get the note sounding here. So don't over press with the left hand, and also don't over pick with the right hand either. Find a pick dynamic you like the sound of. So that's super important. And another thing to look out for is any type of flams. You don't want to hear any type of something like that. You always want a very strong, so you get the finger down and the pick stroke down at the same time. Super important. Otherwise you will never sound articulate when you pick. And these exercises might seem very fundamental and all that stuff, but this will carry over to anything you're playing. So make sure you get this right. So you do that for 5 minutes, focusing on the stuff that I said, and 5 minutes will actually go by pretty quickly when you actually listen and focus to what you're doing. Then you do it again, but now you're going to pick another string and position at random. You don't need to really worry about, you know, keeping track of where you've been before. This will all even out over time. So let's say I go to the 7th fret and the D string, and now I'm gonna do the next exercise, which is 1, 3, 4. So it's the same sequence, but I'm using 1, 3, 4 instead. And it's very important to change this up, because it's a very different feel going up here than here, for example. But again, don't overthink that, just pick a new spot. So that's basically the Yngwie sequence done. So once you've done 5 minutes of 1, 2, 4 and 5 minutes of 1, 3, 4, you move on to the Gilbert exercise. So let's say I'm starting on the B string on the 12th fret. So I'll do 1, 2, 4 here as well. Same thing, you pick a tempo that works. And again, don't try to be on the edge of your abilities. If you feel like, well, I can actually do this at X BPMs, back it off 20 BPMs. Because you don't need to do that. You just need to be at a tempo where everything is really perfect and you don't start building up tension over these 5-minute periods. And of course, if that happens, just stop and shake your hands out and then maybe lower the tempo a bit. So that's another thing with these 5-minute timers. It's really good because you're not stuck at a certain tempo. You can always lower the tempo. And also if you feel like, oh, this works really well, but I would actually want to try it a bit faster, do that by all means, but make sure that you always have the accuracy, you always have the tone that you want, and you always feel relaxed when you do it. All right, so you do that for 5 minutes, 1, 2, 4, and then probably guessed it, you're gonna do 1, 3, 4, and in another position. And that can be anywhere, so it doesn't really matter if you do it on the G string, for example. It's not going to sound the same as you know, any of the other ones, but it doesn't really matter. It's just about playing this fingering and playing this picking pattern across the strings. So that's 20 minutes and that's your practice schedule. And like I said, do this every day. Consistency is key here in building a good technique. But if you want really fast progress, obviously you want to practice more than this, but don't dismiss this as just something that's not worth doing, because it really is. It can make a huge difference if you focus on the accuracy, and don't, you know, if you start sitting there for 5 minutes and just going for it and make a lot of mistakes, it won't help you. It might even hurt your technique instead. But just make sure to find a tempo that you actually get this perfect, and be really honest with yourself. And if you're unsure, just record yourself a day or two when you actually practice this, and then listen back and listen and see like, oh, I actually made mistakes here. Oh, I'm a bit out of sync here, or that wasn't good, and whatever it might be. So that's always good to get a real objective view of how you actually sounded when you practiced. Because it's very easy to think that you sound one way, but when you look back at it, it's like, wow, I did not realize that I sounded like this. So if you stick to the schedule, you'll see a big improvements over a few weeks. Naturally, you'll progress faster if you spend more time. But the important part here initially is to be consistent and make sure you nail each and every rep. Think of the timer as a way to amass a good amount of reps, so make each rep count. You have the tabs for the lick and also the routine available on my Patreon. I also want to mention my new Guitar Gym channel on Instagram. It's like a group chat where I share exclusive tips and lessons. It's totally free, and I really like the fact that it's not based on any algorithm, so anyone joining will actually see the lessons I share. So if you're interested in that, you have the link in the description.